Potatoes, in my opinion, are one of the easiest crops you can grow, especially if you're doing it in containers, because it just makes life so much easier, which makes them a great crop to grow as a beginner. But there are a few ways that you can trip up and make mistakes and end up harvesting really teeny tiny little potatoes, and it can be really disheartening, especially if it's your first time. So I'm going to share my top 3 mistakes that newcomers can make when growing potatoes in containers and how you can avoid them so you get the best from your crop this season. Mistake number 1 is choosing a container that's too small. Potatoes can grow in all sorts of containers. They can grow in potato bags, in old compost bags, in pots, you name it, it can probably grow in it. But the size does matter, and if you grow potatoes in too small a container, it means they haven't got enough room to grow all of those potatoes. They'll dry out very, very quickly, and you'll just struggle to keep them hydrated over the summer months. I'd recommend starting with at least a 10 litre for your first earlies. You can get away with a smaller pot for them because they're so quick to harvest and the potatoes are small anyway. But if you want to be growing main crop potatoes in containers, I grow mine in 25 litre pots, at least 25 litre if you're growing main crop or second early potatoes in pots. Mistake number 2 is not watering enough. Potatoes love a lot of water. They like rich, nutritious soil, and they like a lot of water, and because pots, they can dry out very quickly, especially if your growing medium is quite free draining or if you're having a hot spell. You've got to be watering them. Now, there's no strict rule or guidance that I can give you on how often you should be watering, how much you should be watering. The best thing to do is just stick your finger in the soil, and if you're down to the 3rd knuckle and it still feels dry, then chances are the bottom of the pot isn't going to be much wetter. So give it a really good deep drink. And in the warmer months, I actually prefer to water my potatoes probably twice a week, but do it really, really deeply rather than just a sprinkling once a day. It's much better to water them deeply, less frequently. And mistake number 3 is the one that I see and hear all too much about, is putting too many seed potatoes in your pot. And I get it. You know, you think you've got all of these seed potatoes, you don't want them to go to waste, so you know what, I'll just bung another one in and it will mean I get even more potatoes in that pot, won't it? Well, yes, you might get more potatoes, but because you'll have more seed potatoes growing, fighting for space, fighting for nutrients, fighting for light, then it actually means that they'll be smaller. So you could be growing main crop potatoes in a container and they'll actually be the size of a really tiny salad new potato, and it's because you've put too many potatoes in your pot. I'd always recommend starting with 1 in your pot, and if it's an especially big pot then you can get away with 2. But I really wouldn't go much more than that if it's a main crop variety. If it's a first early or a second early, then you can obviously get away with 2 potatoes in a pot. As I say, it all depends on the pot size, so just use your judgment, and less is always more. However, sometimes you might want to be harvesting small potatoes, in which case do the opposite to all of these methods that I've just taught you and you'll get some nice small potatoes. But when it comes to main crops, I mean, I don't know about you, but I like to be harvesting nice big potatoes that I can roast and just make into lots of delicious recipes. I hope these tips have been useful. Do tell me how your potatoes are going this season.